Okay, well, welcome to what I believe is part 4. I kind of had given up, posted to the O Gauge Railroad forum, basically, the previous video and in the wiring, and I got 2 responses that are very helpful. Don't have the names in front of me. I'll probably put them in the video. And one was a schematic for a Lionel 773, which I believe is a reissue of the 763 in 1950. And the other one was a description of a 763 by someone who owned one, how the wiring was done. And the picture that was posted wasn't the best quality, but because it was a 773, I was able to go to, I think it's Olson's website, and I got this, which is the 773 wiring diagram. And if you notice, it's more like the locomotive I have than any of the other diagrams. The only difference is the 763 700E didn't have a smoke unit, but you'll notice that we have this one feeler going out to ground and to the coil, and then the coil goes over from the E unit, goes over to one side of it's hard to, it looks like it goes to one side of something. Looks like it actually goes to nothing. So that would probably mean it was the one side of the switch. And what you apparently would do is you take this plug and you would put it in here, completing the circuit from it goes from the pickups through the plug into this and then back into the E unit. This is the critical part that I was missing. I was thinking about doing it this way, but I didn't know if it was correct. And then the rest of the stuff, you have the field unit or field windings going also to one side of the switch, but then the other side goes out to this. So I think we can make this work. Definitely makes a whole lot more sense than anything else. So, so what we have, I temporarily tacked this in here. I don't know if we need it. Get rid of that. So what we have is we have a wire that goes from one of the fingers, the metal fingers, and it goes to the ground. Ignore this red wire, it doesn't touch here, it's just being held there for support. It goes up here to this ground. So it goes finger, chassis, coil. The other side of the coil comes out in this red wire, and then the red wire is going to go, according to this, it needs to go to this side of the switch. So what we will do is we will attach it to this side of the switch. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. I really appreciate getting an actual usable wiring diagram. A lot of people posted on the internet wiring diagrams for what they said were the 700E and they were just generic, and obviously they never actually tried to use them. Or they knew how to modify it and didn't post it, which when I am done, I will be putting a corrected 763/700 wiring diagram for anyone else out there who's pulling their hair out because they couldn't find the correct wiring diagram. And once again, I should have laid off the coffee. But as some of you know, without the coffee, it's not even, as I call it, it's my give a damn. Until I've had my coffee, I don't give a damn. Oh, come on. Just took on there. The bad side of using stranded wire. Trying to get it to wrap around things. Okay. And I located one of my dad's transformers, his MTH transformer, so we can actually run this on AC in conventional mode. Alright, so now, so we have one finger going to the chassis, to the coil, the other side of the coil going over here to the switch. The other side of the switch will go from here, it goes out to, let's see here, it'll go to to the pickup. So let's see, I don't want to use yellow, and I don't have anything other than black and red. Well, I do have green. Somebody's gonna complain that I didn't use green. I'm gonna use another red wire. I got an excess of red. So, peel off a hunk of this. You know, when we moved him back to here, he had amassed a great, for lack of a better term, hoard of parts and pieces. Since he was an MTH authorized technician, he was doing repairs on, you know, upgrading and fixing the different MTH equipment, and he had set up little toolkits for each type of locomotive. So he had a toolkit for upgrading a diesel locomotive to Proto-Sound 2, and he had toolkits for doing them for Proto-Sound 3, and the same thing for steam. They were quite redundant. but I guess it made it so he could easily just pick it up, and everything he needed was in that toolkit. Of course, the bad side of that is the absolute incredible amount of tools that I have amassed. I have so we got positive, and it goes to this side of the switch, which also has one side of the coil. That's good. So I have 3 or 4 sets of jeweler's files, 3 or 4 sets of small screwdrivers, 3 or 4 sets of all sorts of things. Let's see. I think that's the only other. These are the only things that are going to this connection. So I won't have to solder any more to this side. My dad was thoroughly and completely and totally obsessed with trains and fire trucks. I mean, some people think that they are into fire trucks and trains. They have nothing on my dad. He was an encyclopedia of trains, fire trucks, and pretty much nothing else. Oh, come on, quit. Well, that's not the prettiest, but it's there. Okay. Alright, so what have we got wired? Well, this isn't even in the circuit. This is wired, 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 this is part of the switch, this is wired, these are wired, these are wired. So that leaves this one last wire, which in this is green, but in mine it's a black wire, and it goes to the other side of the field coil. Some of you are, see, there's a lot of stuff you don't know about my dad. I only knew him for the first 11 years that I was alive, and my parents had a really nasty divorce, and won't go into details, but he thought it was best if he just went away. And so I didn't have any contact with him for, I don't remember exactly how long, but I think it was on the order of well, let's put it this way, it was from 79 till about 92. Okay, I think that is it. I mean, and then from 92 it was a long distance relationship because he lived so far away, 1,500 miles. Alright, let's see what happens when we fire this up. I don't have a set of those fancy ball bearings that people use. There's still some things that need to be done. I have to figure out why this chatters. It doesn't seem to be rubbing on anything, but yet it makes a chattering noise, and I'm hoping that might be related to it maybe being running with DC. I don't know. Alright. Let's see, where's... a good place to ground this. Now we'll see how well that works. Alright, so we're going forward. I'm running her slower and slower to see how slow she'll go. Then we're going to turn her off. She'll go into neutral. Turn her off again. Goes in reverse. Neutral. Now we'll try the direction button on here. Hallelujah! It's alive! It's alive! Alright. So, that's good. Once again, very appreciative of all the people who got me the information. It was driving me a little crazy. One of the things I did on this, and I'm gonna, before I button or close it up, because the wires I used were so much heavier, I put a long piece of 14 gauge wire here to, as like a bus. So we got the wire going here, and I've got it routing around to this spot instead of going up and over, because I didn't want it going anywhere near this rod, and it's held with enough tension that it doesn't hit this wheel. And the only thing I have to do is just cut off this excess. I had put way too much wire in here because I didn't know how much I was going to be soldering to it. And just to keep everything from vibrating around, and I'm going to attach it with just tighten everything up with this zip ties. Alright, so I'm going to be fiddling around with the most ideal settings for this coupling. in the 763 assembly instructions, it was talking about how you didn't want this to be too tight and too loose, and you didn't want it in one particular direction. So I will be messing with that, and then I will come back. Okay, well, that didn't take very long, but I didn't know how fiddly it would be. So here's what I did. I moved this one as far forward as I could, and then I loosened this one, and what I did was I ran the engine, the motor, so because it has a lot of play, it can move back and forth almost I don't know, 1/16 of an inch, and I want it running in its ideal location, and it's kind of self-centering. So once it's stopped, I then from that position moved it as far forward as this this little rubber piece would let it go, moving the coupler but leaving this in its desired location. And I put a couple of drops of oil. There's not really there's a bushing, not really any bearing, and there's not even a wick to lubricate the motor bearing, which I find kind of, I don't know, cheap, for lack of a better term. So I put a couple of drops of oil. That improved the sound. It still makes a bit of a rattling noise, but I think that's mostly because of the brushes. The brushes there's about 3/16 of an inch left of both of them. Probably should be replaced, but since this isn't going to be run, it's not something I'm going to worry about, and it can be replaced with the loco put together. So I'm going to start putting this together, and may or may not put some of it on video. It depends, because I've got to consult. Thankfully, I've got the 763 assembly instructions from Lionel, where some moron scanned them, and they're all cut off. So you can't really read the instructions, and some of the diagrams are cut off, but there's enough of it, like what I need are the correct order in which to put the trucks on. Everything else I really paid close attention to, but I kind of didn't do that. I do have some sections of track, and I'll see if I can run it at least back and forth a few feet. There we go. Oh good, there's just barely enough of the pilot truck and the trailing truck information to put it together. The picture's cut off, but there's enough of it that I can see what goes where. So we'll bring this back. Oh, yeah. Bring this back so I can work on it, and I will come back if there's anything interesting to show. Slight change of plans. I realized I couldn't put the trucks on, at least not on the back, until I had put the boiler on. So I will continue on. I did not realize how close the tolerances were that the chassis fits in there. I had to move some wiring and remove one of the zip ties that I had put on the front to hold this wire in place, because it couldn't close it with that in there. But it's all in there, and I tested it several times to make sure it's still running. I didn't pinch any wires or short anything. So we'll continue on with the trucks. Alright, so I got it back together. Had to take it apart one time again because something shorted. Not really sure. I think it was the lights for the wiring for the light. Put it back together. Normally, when I do a long string of videos, after I do the last one, I do a wrap-up video, kind of a too long, didn't watch type of video. But I'm just going to include that in this one since it's not going to be particularly long. So we're going to go over all the problems, things, and discrepancies that I can think of off the top of my head, because I didn't write anything down. Get over it. So let's just start. Turn this sideways. Let's get rid of this and this. Okay. So here's all the, well, for one thing, I'm starting to think if this is a 763, it doesn't say 763 all over it. The entire chassis is stamped with 763, and I actually found, I'm sorry, 700E-2, and I found that the boiler is stamped 700E-1, and there's too many, I think this was a kit, so it was probably the 700K. But let's start out. We'll go to the front of this locomotive, and we'll start on here. This is all wrong. There's a these linkages are wrong. This one is completely wrong. It should bend out before bending back, and it doesn't. These are supposed to be joined with a linkage and then attached somewhere around here. They're not. This is one of these, which the head broke off. There are some washers missing. Let's see. The scale coupler is missing. This may be aftermarket, I don't know. All the wiring is kind of consistent with, I mean, the pipes and stuff would be consistent with someone putting this together. Whether it was my dad, I don't know. Probably not. Lots of problems with the tubing not being correct. The E-unit had been bypassed, and I had to completely rewire it. Thank you to the people whose names are going to be displayed on the screen, because I didn't actually look at them, I'm sorry. For the wiring. The wiring is the same as a 773, but without a smokestack, and I will provide a schematic. There's no, like I said, there's no coupler. I have a tender, geez, but there's no whistle unit in it. And I'm gonna set this up on some track after I clean the track off. It's disgustingly, horribly filthy. What else? Oh, the trucks, or the pilot and the, what is this thing called, a trailing truck? They're missing parts. They're missing little special washers, which I think are these. I found some. Put that in there where you can see it. But these are too big. I need the next size down, and I actually found a way to get around all that. The springs were very weak and probably wrong, so I remembered that in my dad's hoard of stuff he had a bunch of springs, so I used these and I jerry-rigged these so they actually are pretty solid. I'm not going to set up any curves to test it. I just don't have time and space. But I'm going to have to fix that one. The motor has, the brushes should probably be replaced at some point, but they've probably got a long time before that. They do spark a lot. Locking out the E unit works, thankfully, because whenever I turned it upside down, the E unit wouldn't, the locomotive wouldn't work right. Until I locked out the E unit with it in forward. There's a jewel missing on the front here. I did replace the bulb with an LED, and you'll see that how that works when I run it. Gotta, like I said, clean up. But yeah, I think this thing was a kit. For some reason this side of the locomotive doesn't go down all the way. I don't know why. I think the screw, there's a bracket that holds the light bulb, and the bottom bracket where it screws into the frame is possibly stripped or partially stripped, so it's not really being held down. But oh, and I turned it upside down and ran it, and then took some steel wool and cleaned up these drive wheels so that they'll make good contact on the track I have. I only have MTH track. Oh no, MTH track, horrible. I don't have any old, well, I got some old standard gauge track, but no O gauge. So the next thing you'll see is this on my back porch, and we'll run it back and forth a couple times. Okay, we got 3 sections of straight track, about 6 feet, and she's going to come up in neutral, and then we'll do her forward and go back. So okay, go backwards. Well, just as I thought, one of the oiler rod was binding, and it was hanging up, and that damn tender makes it difficult to reach in and grab anything. Now what is it? There it goes. Damn oiler rod keeps. Yeah. Seems like the E-unit is binding up. Well, that's all I'm going to do with it for now. Don't really have any place to display it, at least not right now. Let us never speak of this again. This is the next project. Doesn't that look like fun? Huh? Huh?